Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Reverend Mary Frances Drake. I am an ordained priest in the Contemplative Christian Mystical Order. And I'm here today on Good Friday, April the 10th, 2020, to share with you some of my tradition and meditation during these hours of Good Friday that are holy, contemplative hours in my tradition. You hear in the background some monks chanting. And I wanted to start with a little bit of a description of Christian mysticism and the practices of Christianity that are, in fact, quite like other mystical traditions. A mystic is someone who, through contemplation and self-surrender, has an experience of union with God. So all of the things around me are the trappings of Christian mysticism. Like in many other traditions, there is artwork. This is Mother Mary from the apparition of Mary at Guadalupe. Jesus here, blessing. Mother Mary on the altar, the candles. I had incense burning in here before, but it was getting a little smoky, so I took that out. You might know the incense, frankincense, which is a resin from a tree in the Indian Peninsula. There are bells similar to the gongs of the East, beads similar to the mala beads. In Christianity, these are rosary beads. And candles, sound, light, scent, postures, prayers, all things that help us to get into the mode of contemplation of the divine. There's a beautiful book by Paramahansa Yogananda called The Yoga of Jesus. And in that book, he talks about the 5 aspects of yoga. Yoga means union. So the 5 ways that we can encourage or enhance union. Those ways are devotion, which is called bhakti in the East. And of course, in the Christian tradition, there's prayer, meditation, song, chant, hymns, devotion to Mother Mary, the rosary. Those are the forms of devotion that are in the Christian tradition. In general, the mystical tradition, the Catholic and Episcopal traditions, a little bit more than the Protestant. There are sacraments where we create the energy in a ritual for the transfer of energy from the spiritual world into the material world. So those are blessings. You might see in this picture of Jesus above me, he has his hand like this. This is the blessing mudra, what we call it in yoga, blessing mudra, and he has his other hand on his heart, under his heart, blessing and sending love, sending his love and his mind to us through the blessing, which is the same as what happens in the sacrament of communion, the body and blood, the bread and wine, blessed by Jesus from the spiritual world through the priest into matter. And then we take it in somewhat like a homeopathic, and the resonance of that changes our being. So all of these things that are done are to help us remember that our spiritual nature is already united with God. Devotion is a very strong way of connecting to the spirit world. And it is something that we can do repeatedly to enhance our relationship and enhance the ease with which we have access. It's not that there's a secret way in so much as that our humanity and our human external mind is often very busy and distracted and unfocused. So these practices help us to maintain a routine and a habit and a ritual of focus and creating a liminal space, a threshold through which we can move our consciousness from external world consciousness to internal spiritual consciousness. So the chanting, which is sometimes called japji or kirtan in other traditions, has to do with repeating, using the voice and the resonance of the voice, the word, to repeat the names of God or to repeat blessings or supplications to God. The monks you just heard chanting, we'll listen to them again when we're doing our meditation. That is, in the Christian tradition, very prevalent. Even hymns are generally songs of praise or supplication to God in some way. So those are Japji and Bhakti. Then Jhana, which is called Dhyana sometimes, or study or wisdom. In the Christian tradition, of course, we have the holy book, the Bible, that is studied, but we also have the lives of saints. This is a statue of St. Francis of Assisi. Many people are familiar with St. Francis, as he is the nature saint, also a mystic, also wrote the prayer, the St. Francis prayer, "Make me a channel of your peace," which you might have heard of. Then there's Mother Mary, also a saint. My personal favorite, Padre Pio, who is a saint who died in the 1960s in Italy, and he bore the stigmata of Christ on his body for 50 years. So these beings, St. John of the Cross, who wrote The Dark Night of the Soul, St. Teresa of Avila, who wrote The Interior Castle and many other things, Hildegard von Bingen, so throughout history, there have been many, many mystics in the Christian tradition, as well as other traditions, of course, that talk about this inner relationship with this beloved relationship, marriage of the soul with the Christ, of the soul with God. So as Christian mystics, we practice these practices, these sacraments, meditations, the chanting, in order to experience that and take the energy of that into our life and into the world, so that we can remember who we are while we're in the midst of our human experience. And the human experience is a lovely and wonderful experience, but also a challenging experience. Right now, it's Holy Week, it's Good Friday, it's the time that Jesus was dying on the cross to take up the sins or the karma of the world. It's kind of a heavy time. It's also April 2020, when we're living through a pandemic and separated from one another, and people are sick and dying, and healthcare workers are overworked, and people are worried. So this is a heavy time that can be lightened by remembering that we are of the Spirit, and even though we get sick and we die, like the Buddha said, we age and we die. If we remember that, then those processes are not as devastating and despairing as they might otherwise be if we consider ourselves finite beings. The other two aspects of yoga that are in support of union with God are karma yoga, which is service. So I am vowed into service as a priest, and so my vow obligates and encourages me and draws me toward serving people. I do that through prayer, through giving, through whatever I can, whatever way I can do that. I'm sure that you have a way that you're doing service as well. Even doing your own practice is a service to the world, because, of course, we all contribute to the mind of the world and how the world is doing in general. And then finally, there is, there's the asanas or hatha yoga, which is the postures. So as I said, Jesus has mudras. There are many, many icons and pieces of art where you see Jesus or Mary or the saints using the mudras, the hand postures, or having their hands open, or prostrating. Monks and priests and nuns, often you'll see them prostrating in front of the cross, surrendering themselves to the cross. So all of these ways that we have combined create what's called Raja Yoga, or the king of yogas, the highest yoga, where we're practicing all of these things. The chant, the breath happens during the chant, the voice happens, the smell of the incense, the study that we have of the examples in our traditions, the devotion to those teachers that came before us, the service that we do for God and for people and for the earth. All those things come together to create a space in us where we can experience union with the divine, and over time, more and more consistent union, more and more consistent flow of spirit. And then we are living in grace rather than living in karma. We're living in grace. And that is the Hail Mary, full of grace, we say. That is one of the aspirations of a Christian mystic, is to live in grace, to live outside of karma, and to live in grace. And you see that in other mystical traditions as well. So in other traditions, for example, in Islam, that would be Sufism is the inner contemplative mystical tradition in Islam. In Judaism, it would be Hasidic or Kabbalistic studies. In Hindu traditions, it would be contemplative Hinduism, like Paramahansa Yogananda practiced, who you might know from the autobiography of a yogi. And in Buddhism, it would be the Zen tradition of Buddhism, the contemplative tradition, which has us seeking that union with the great oneness. So that is how the tradition of Christian mysticism is very similar to the every other tradition when we're looking at the mystical aspects of it. Even though the external things may be different, the teachers and the saints and those who inspire us might be different. We're doing a similar kind of thing, devotion, study, service, postures, using our physical form to create a space and a chemical balance in us that is conducive to that kind of spiritual contemplation, quietness inside. So for me, I don't see a difference in the purpose of mysticism in any tradition, because the goal is the same. The goal is union of your soul with God, union of your soul with everything. The blissful, ecstatic union of the soul, or the annihilation of the ego and the part of us that feels separate, the annihilation of separateness. And that's what mysticism is all about. So that is my short lesson teaching. You know, I was invited to do satsang, so this is going to be shared with several groups. And satsang is a teaching time. In my tradition, we might call it a sermon. So if I put a little bit of sermon in here, I would add that in the beauty of the relationship with the Christ, what we come to know is that when Jesus walked the earth, he came to teach the high teaching of love, compassion, forgiveness, and peace. Those are not easy things to accomplish in a world like ours, with a humanity like ours. So they take a lot of practice, a lot of concentration, a lot of help. And we have the spiritual help of Jesus and Mary and the saints and angels. And in every tradition, there are spiritual teachers and avatars and exemplars available to show us the way. And the more we attune ourselves to them, the more we're guided by them, the more we're blessed by them, the more we can fulfill the mission that we have as individual humans in the earth in this lifetime that we're in right now. So I would like to have us take a moment or a few moments, to have a contemplation on this Good Friday of the sacrifices of Jesus. And I know that might seem a little bit heavy, but what I want to impress upon you is that even in the challenges that we are facing in the world, and even in the struggle of turning our mind toward the suffering of Jesus as a man through the crucifixion process and his death on the cross, the higher remembering is that God can make good out of these things. And because we know the end of the story, we know that Easter morning is coming, that Jesus resurrects from the dead and shows us that he's victorious over death, and therefore we are eternal beings. We are eternal beings. And when we remember that, it informs our life in a whole different way than it does when we think we are mortal. So I'm going to have a little quiet time with a chant, and then I will lead us in a short meditation to hopefully give you an example, an experience of the Christian mystical tradition and how we might relate to Jesus, Mary, and other beings that are available to us to help us on our spiritual journey. Oh, excuse me. All right, so let's listen for a moment. You can close your eyes and just feel the energy of this chant. Just allow the vibration of the chanting to move through your body and your mind as you breathe deeply, letting go of your thinking mind, coming down into your heart, letting go of any emotional reactions or disturbances in your heart. Relaxing your body. And with the chant and the breath, the quiet mind, calm heart, the relaxed body, we can fall deeper inside of ourselves. Falling back inside, behind and below our hearts, to a place of quiet, to a place of peace. And in there, in that space, resting in our own being. As we turn away from the outside world and into the quiet inside, the great expanse of the inner world available to us. Let's imagine together that we're each walking on a path in a woodland that leads to an open glen. And there in the center stands Jesus, the Christ, the teacher, the Redeemer. And even if Christianity is not your tradition, you might want to know him. You might want to meet him. As one of those who incarnated for the benefit of humankind, for the upliftment of humanity, to restore us to our nature and to oneness with God. If you are so inclined, let yourself move towards him. See his arms open to you. And if you're so inclined, you can move toward him and receive the embrace that he has for you, or whatever gesture feels comfortable. Maybe he's bowing to you. Maybe he's taking a seat and inviting you to sit with him. Allow yourself to have a conversation with Jesus the Christ. And if you're so moved in that conversation, you can ask him about the sacrifice of this day, of this Good Friday. I'll leave you now in silence with some chanting music to your background as you have your conversation with Christ.
Fear raises.
Slowly bringing yourself back from your conversation with Jesus, thanking him for being with you. Embracing him as you turn to go, knowing that you can reunite with him whenever you like. And walking yourself back toward your body and toward the room that you're sitting in. Take a moment to look into your heart. Feel any shift that has happened in your level of peace and relaxation, your level of harmony. Let the fruits of the Spirit be in you. Love, peace, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. These are the qualities that arise in us as humans when we align ourselves with the spirit world. These same qualities that St. Francis asked to have, that he might be an instrument of peace. Make me a channel of your peace. Where there is darkness, let me bring your light. Where there is sadness, ever joy. And where there's doubt, true faith in you. O Master, grant that I may never see so much to be consoled as to console, all to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love with all my soul. Make me a channel of your peace. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned, in giving of ourselves that we receive, and in dying that we're born to eternal life. I leave you now with this blessing. May that mind be in you that is in Christ Jesus, a mind that is love, compassion, peace, and harmony. May it come into you and through you. May you be blessed on this holy Good Friday and every day. In Jesus' holy name. Amen. Thank you for joining me here. I hope you've enjoyed this time, this contemplation of Good Friday, of Christian mysticism, and of Jesus as the Christ. I wish you many blessings for you and yours, and I will continue to pray for our earth during these strange and scary times. Peace to all of you. Goodbye.